So today we're going to dive into Lightroom Classic. We're going to edit a portrait. We're going to do things a little bit stylistically. We're going to play around with this one. See where we can take it, see what we can do with it, and use a few of the different tools. It's good to stretch your legs a little bit like this because, you might not want to use all of these tools every single time you come to edit a photo, especially a portrait. But it's good to know how they work, what you can do with them, and really play around, get to know them, get to know your editing software really well. So that's exactly what we're going to do. We're going to go for a stylistic look for this portrait. Let's just get involved. Let's get into it because it's Tutorial Tuesday. Welcome back to Tutorial Tuesday, where each and every Tuesday we bring you a brand new photography tutorial. This week, let's just dive into it. I've already told you what we're doing. We're going to edit this portrait. Now, this was taken on the new Fujifilm GFX 100 II, which, that is a really, really lovely camera to use. And I was really impressed by things like the autofocus. It made shooting stuff like this a lot easier, nice shallow depth of field, but it's very easy for it to just lock onto the eye. Now, when we go to edit a portrait and we look at something like this, the starting point I'll always look at is, does the portrait kind of hold up by itself? Is it totally fine without me going for some crazy stylistic edit? I think that's a good baseline to be at, right? So I like this portrait. I like the depth of field. I like the kind of framing. We might crop this a little bit. We've got a lot of resolution to play with, but even if we didn't, I might crop this a little bit. There's a couple of things I'm not so keen on, and maybe we'll just change the framing a touch, but I love the lighting, the time of day, all that kind of stuff. There's a lot of lovely colors here as well, but we're going to play around with all of that. So let's start getting involved. First up, let's start by cropping this photo a little bit. So I think I want to go for a wide kind of feel. 16:9 seems good. And what I'm going to do is just bring this in a little bit. I want to remove the lower part of my legs here. That looks pretty good, doesn't it? Let's maybe just move it up a little bit. The subject, which of course is me, still relatively centered in the photo, which I like, but a little bit more room towards the side that I'm actually facing as opposed to the other side, because it just feels better in the composition, right? It doesn't feel so claustrophobic. It feels kind of correctly proportioned. So great, happy with the crop. I like this kind of foreground element we've got here out of focus. We've got background elements out of focus. Great, really happy with that. Now, the actual lighting, I think, is really nice. It was taken kind of around sunset. So we've got this directional light, so we've got light, and we've got shadow on this side, which I think looks really good, and the tones are nice. So we probably don't have to do that much with it, but we can have a little bit of a play. Now, if you don't kind of know where you want to start with something like this, you want to go for a stylistic look, but you're not sure exactly the kind of thing you might want to go for, a good place to start is actually over on the left. We can actually look at some of these kind of presets that are already in Lightroom. Now, I'm looking at the black and white ones right now. They do look quite cool, and I think a lot of these work very well. And as you can see, you can just mouse over them and actually see kind of what you think they look like actually applied to the photo. That's a really nice way of just quickly getting some ideas. Black and white's probably not what I'm looking for. I like these cinematic presets. If you've watched some other videos, I use those now and then to kind of give myself some ideas, give myself a starting point. Again, you can just mouse over some of these. I mean, look at that. That's a very interesting way to edit the photo, right? It's a different kind of style. Yeah, that's, again, a very different kind of style. And you can mouse over these like this. Look at that. That's very kind of saturated, but it's nice and warm, nice and summery kind of feeling, which is nice because, the weather's turning now. But again, you can just mouse over these and get an idea for what you like. I like that one, for example. It's a little bit softer. And then, coming off those, it just takes you back to where you were. So it's a good position to start in, and let's say we go for CN13, right? That's in the Cinematic 2 preset kind of list. Let's click that. But let's say we think it's too much, right? That's now applied to the photo. We can come up here to the top and we can use this preset slider, the amount here. We can reduce that down a little bit or up. Look at that. I quite like that. That's a great kind of spot to start at, I think. It's I like the coloring. I like the look of it. We could then come over to the right and we can adjust anything you want at all. There will be adjustments made now based on that preset, but we can now adjust things further. We can change things back to how we want. Let's have a look at this now. So it's a good position to start in. I'm going to try just warming this up a little bit because it is, it's a summery evening. Let's see how that feels. So just warming this up with the color temperature here, maybe bringing the tint towards the green just a touch. Maybe there's too much magenta in there. I think that looks pretty good. And what I might do is actually come down, just reduce the saturation a little bit and bump up the vibrance a touch. I like to do that sometimes just to get the most out of those colors. Now I'm going to bring the clarity up just a touch as well. And I might just bring the blacks down a little bit there as well. I quite like that. That looks pretty good. Now you can see kind of where you started and where you've ended up by pressing the / key on your keyboard. So if we press it, that's where we started. This is where we are now. We can press Y as well to see it before and after side by side. I'm really a big fan of the color of that sky. That preset has really brought out the nice blue. I like the blue in that sky. So let's carry on. So we can now scroll down. HSL, I think, has been affected in quite a big way by the preset, but we can just adjust that. We can tweak that a little bit more if we want to. So for example, I might bring the saturation up on the blue a little bit. And the luminance, do you know what? I might bring that just down even a touch more on the blue because I like the idea of this kind of dark sky. We might come back to that in a minute. The color grading here, we can actually click and hold on this little eye icon here to turn this off and then back on. I think it's doing some nice stuff. We've got kind of a blue in the shadows, a little bit of orange in the highlights. We've got a yellow in the kind of midtones. I might just bring that round towards more of an orange. Yeah, I prefer that, I think. So let's see where we started. / on the keyboard. Where we are now. Really big fan of kind of how this is coming out. Now, I am going to add a little bit of a vignette. So we've come down here. Let's just bring that in a little bit. Not too much. We don't want to go too crazy with it, but I like the look of something like that. And then right down at the bottom, I'm going to bring the red primary over towards the orange and the blue primary over towards the teal, just for a little bit of a teal and orange kind of look. I might even just bring the saturation down just a touch. Yeah, I like that. I like that. We might want to bring the overall saturation down just a little bit as well, because I feel like it's getting a little bit overly colorful here. Okay, so I like where we've got to so far. Again, before, after, I like where we've ended up. There's a couple of things now that I would do with masks, and that's where I think that you can really get involved with photo editing, and certainly with portraits, there's a lot of options that you can kind of play around with. So we're going to come up here to the masking tool. Let's go ahead and first of all, let's click on subject. Now that's going to select me. Lightroom's actually going to mask me out nicely there. There we go. Perfect. Lightroom does a really good job with this, and the masking is so easy now with Lightroom. So we can actually then just bring the exposure up, not too much, but just a little bit, right? Just to make me definitely the brightest part of the photo, and actually for sure the focal point, the bit that your eye naturally goes to. The next thing I'm going to do, because we said we go for a bit more of a stylistic kind of feel to this, I'm going to bring a linear gradient in, and I'm going to do it from the top down. Now what I actually want to do is darken the sky. So we're going to right click on this mask 2 here, intersect mask with, and we're going to click select sky. Now what that's going to do is only apply that linear gradient that we've just created to what it also considers to be the sky. So you can see now it is behind the subject. It is not interacting with me, but it is interacting with the sky. And what we can do then is maybe darken this down a little bit. Maybe we bring the saturation down just a touch as well, because we don't want it to be too crazy. Maybe we even bring the dehaze up a little bit. That's an interesting kind of look. I don't know how I feel about it. I thought I'd be really into it. You can turn that mask on and off to see what you think. Let me know what you think in the comments. Do you like that? Sometimes I like to play around with darkening the top of the sky. I know that's certainly a technique a lot of photographers like to go for, and it's kind of I think it's quite a nice look to a photo. But let me know what you think. Do you know what? We're going to keep it on. We said we'd go stylistic. We're stretching our legs here with the tools available to us. We're going to kind of get a feel for what we like, what we don't like. So let me know what you think about that. I'm unsure, but we'll leave it on for now. We can always take it off a little bit later on. Let's go create new mask. Let's go select people. And now we can actually pick the people in the photo. So Lightroom will identify all the different people. In this case, of course, there's just one. And if I click person 1 here, it's now going to detect all the different areas that it can easily mask out. So we've got facial skin, body skin, eyebrows, and then the whites, the iris and the pupil, lips, hair, facial hair. It's pretty impressive stuff. And as you see, as I'm sort of, I mean, it is crazy, isn't it? Clothes are in here. I think that's relatively new. As you can kind of see, as I kind of mouse over these, it is just highlighting them on the photo. And it's done it so fast. And it really does seem to know the difference between the skin, the facial hair, the clothes, and then the eyes. And it's pretty wild stuff, I think. So, for example, right now, let's go for the eyes. Let's tick both of those. Let's not create them as 2 separate masks. Let's just actually untick that and click create mask. Now this is going to create a new mask which encompasses basically the eyes. Let's just bring the exposure up a little bit on those and the clarity, just so we get kind of a little bit of a bump to the eyes. We probably don't want to go too mad because it'll start to look pretty weird, But that's an interesting way to actually go ahead and edit your portrait like that. And in this different situation, there's a lot that I might do with that. You could soften the face. For example, the skin on the face, you could soften that. You could create a new mask. You could select people, select that person, select the facial skin, create a mask, and then do something like bring the clarity down a little bit, bring the texture down a little bit. That's going to soften that skin. It's going to soften any blemishes, lines, stuff like that. I love the option to do that and how fast and easy that is to actually do. What I am going to do is create a new radial gradient, and I'm going to draw that nice and big, nice and feathered across our sort of subject here. I'm going to right click on that, intersect mask with select subject. Now that's only going to apply that radial gradient now to our subject. I'm going to come up here. Let's go exposure up a little bit. And let's bring the dehaze down. So a negative dehaze, just a touch, just a touch. And what we're going to do is then also bring in a linear gradient from the side and do a similar sort of thing. Up that exposure and bring that dehaze down a little bit to give us kind of the simulated kind of sunlight feel. Having done that has made the photo a little bit brighter, a little bit, maybe a little bit higher on the old exposure. So we could bring that down overall now. Let's bring that down to something like that. That looks quite nice. The next thing I might want to do is just lighten one side of this face just a little bit. So let's go ahead with a brush. Let's just brush this on a little bit, just on this darker side of the face. And what we can do is then just bump the exposure up just a touch, just to get a little bit more detail out of that. Now let's press the backslash key on the keyboard for the before and after again. So before, this is where we started. This is how the photo looked originally. This is where we've got to. Now we've done a lot with the colors. We've done a lot with the light actually. Now it does feel like it has a little bit of a lower contrast feel to it. So you could always bump that contrast up a little bit if you wanted to. I think that probably adds to the overall photo. And then you could also further play around with highlights and shadows to get more contrast if you wanted to, maybe even bring those highlights down just a touch, actually just to protect this skin tone on this side, which is a little bit brighter. But I think that's a very nice kind of portrait that we've ended up with. And I think for me, I'd be very happy with this end result. So one last time, this was the before, this is where we started with the photo, and not even really, because this is of course pre-cropping as well. So in fact, I'll show you, I'll throw them up on the screen. This is how the photo looked straight out of camera. This is the raw photo. And then this is actually how the photo ended up. We've cropped it, we've adjusted the colors. We started off with a preset, which we then adjusted the amount that's applied, which gives us a good foundation for where to start, a good area that we can kind of play around with things from there. It's a great way to get some ideas for how you want to edit if you don't have something in mind for the kind of look you might want to go for. And that's especially true if you're not just going for a very light edit. If you're going for a nice light edit, you probably don't need to do that. But if you want to go for something a little bit more stylistic, a little bit more involved, sometimes those presets are a great way to get involved. You can also have a look up here. So actually on the editing panel here, we can go to these different profiles. I like the modern ones. And again, you can mouse over these. These can be applied at any time. So let's say we want to go for even more sort of muted tones here. We could go for modern 03. Let's click that. And again, you've got this amount slider up here. Now these are different because, I mean, look at that. If I bring that all the way up to 200, that's a very stylistic choice, right? That really changes the feel of the photo, but it's very cool. I think it's a nice look. It's fun to experiment with this stuff. Now, the nice thing about the profiles is that you can come off that, you can make further changes. Those profiles are not going to change any of these sliders, unlike the presets over here, which will change these sliders for you. Those profiles will not. They're a separate thing that is then applied to the photo. You can go in at any time and actually bring that right back down to 0, back up to 100, change that kind of at any time. It's nice and easy to actually do that. But, look at that. That's a very interesting and different kind of portrait. Now, let me know what you think. Do you often like to go in a little bit harder? Stretch your legs, like I say, trying out the different tools, getting to know the program a little bit better. Is that something you like to do? I'm not saying I would end up actually editing the photo exactly like this, but I like to kind of get a feel for where I can take things so that I know what I like and what I don't like. Is that something that you play around with? Let me know down in the comments. Where would you have taken this photo to? Where would you have stopped it? Would you have kept it pretty natural? It's always super interesting, right? Because it's super subjective. You can do all kinds of things. I'd love to know your thoughts, so let me know down in the comments. Otherwise, of course, there's links to things like the GFX 100 II and all the kit that we use for this video as well down in the description, so you can go and check that out. Don't forget to like and subscribe as well, because there's new content all the time. I'll see you next time, but until then, as always, thanks for watching.